Hello everyone, this is April the 28th, 2021, or on the Jewish calendar it is IR 165781. I do apologize for there being a delay between the last postings and for the last of the videos, but there was some life issues. Plus, I had my second dose of vaccine, and I had some reactions to that. It was really bad, but I just wanted to sleep. It's really weird because I didn't feel tired or fatigued, but I just slept. So, but I'm all better now and back on track, and hopefully there will be no more delays. But I'm not going to promise you that because, there's always a curve in life, but we just pick up and go on. So I just want to give a shout out to everyone who's been listening to my podcast. So along with everyone who I have called out before, we also have Pensacola, Florida, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Alhambra, Arizona, Tyler, Texas, Alexander City, Alabama, Columbus, Ohio, Amarillo, Texas, Plano, Texas, Colorado Springs, Colorado, and in the United Kingdom, Glasgow, Scotland, and then back in United States, Trotwood, Ohio, Metairie, Louisiana. I hope I said that correctly. And there's another hard one, Temecula, California, and Las Cruces, New Mexico, Madison, Alabama, Clinton Township, Michigan, Ladera Ranch, California, Bettendorf, Iowa, Lake Charles, Louisiana, Chicago, Illinois, Sherwood, Oregon, Boone, North Carolina, which isn't too far from where I'm located, Norco, California, Utica, New York, Marshall, North Carolina. And there's a funny thing about Marshall that's also not far from where I'm at. But Marshall is one word, Marshall, and not far from Marshall is a town called Mars Hill, and it is two words, Mars and then Hill. And I've always thought that was kind of weird how it was basically the same name but just a letter difference. Broadview Heights, Ohio, Kinston, North Carolina, Patrick Air Force Base, Florida, and thank you, all you military people, and for what you do to keep us protected. Country Club, Florida, Corinth, Texas, Palm Desert, California, Horatio, South Carolina, Newark, California, Duncanville, Texas, West Sacramento, California, and Alexander City, Alabama. So in our last video, we stopped at the end of chapter 8 of the book of Joshua. So now we're going to start in chapter 9. And I am back at the Ugly Mug Cafe in Hendersonville, North Carolina. It's a beautiful day here in the mountains. The sun is shining, and even if it was raining, it would still be a beautiful day. So starting at verse 1. When all the kings on the west side of the Jordan in the hills, in the Shephelah, and all along the shore of the great sea that runs to Lebanon, the Hittite, Amorite, Canaanite, Perizzi, Hava, and Yebusi, heard what had happened, they joined forces to fight together against Jehoshua and Israel. But when the inhabitants of Gibeah heard what Jehoshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they developed a clever deception that made themselves look as if they had been on a long journey by putting old sacks on their donkeys and taking used wineskins that had burst and been mended back together. They put old patched sandals on their feet and dressed in worn-out clothes. and took as provisions nothing but dried up bread that was crumbling to pieces. Then they went to Jehoshua in the camp at Gilgal, and said to him and the men of Israel, "We have come from a country far away. Now make a covenant with us." The men of Israel said to the Hivi, "How do we know that you don't live here among us? If you do, we don't want to make a covenant with you." But they answered Jehoshua, "We are your servants." Jehoshua asked, "Who are you, and where did you come from?" They answered him, "Your servants have come from a very distant country because of the reputation of Adonai your God. We have heard reports about him, everything he did in Egypt, and everything he did to the two kings in the Amorite across the Jordan, Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan and Ashtaroth. So our leaders and all the people living in our country said to us, 'Take provisions with you for the journey. Go to meet them and say to them, "We are your servants, and now make a covenant with us. Here's the bread which we took for our provisions. It was still warm when we took it out of our homes the day we left to come to you. Now look at it. It's dry and turned to crumbs. And these wineskins were new when we filled them. But look, now they're torn. Likewise, these clothes of ours and our shoes are worn out because of the very long journey." The men sampled some of their food, but didn't seek the advice of Adonai. So Jehoshua made peace with them and made a covenant with them to spare their lives. And the leading officials of the community swore to them. But 3 days later, after they had made the covenant with them, they heard that they were their neighbors, and they lived there with them. The people of Israel traveled and arrived at their cities on the 3rd day. Their cities were Gabon, Kephirah, Beerot, and Kiriath Yearim. The people of Israel did not attack them because the leading officials of the community had sworn to them by Adonai, the God of Israel. But all the community grumbled against the leaders. However, the leaders replied to the whole community, "We have sworn to them by Adonai, the God of Israel, so we can't touch them. Here's what we will do to them. We will let them live, so that God's anger will not be on us because of the oath we swore to them. Yes, let them live," the leaders continued, "but let them chop wood and draw water for the whole community." This is what the leaders said. Jehoshua summoned them and said this to them, "Why have you deceived us by saying, 'We come from a place very far away,' when in fact you are living right here with us? Now you have a curse on you. You will be slaves forever, supplying people to chop wood and draw water for the house of my God." They answered Jehoshua, "It is because we heard the reports that Adonai your God had ordered his servant Moshe to give you all the land and to destroy all the inhabitants of the land from ahead of you. So we were terrified for our lives on account of you. That's why we did this. Now, as you see, we are in your hands. Do to us whatever seems good and right to you." So Jehoshua did exactly that. He saved them from the power of the people of Israel, so that they didn't kill them. But he did that same day make them choppers of wood and drawers of water for the community and for the altar of Adonai in the place which you would choose. And they remain so to this day. That's why it's always important to consult God before you do anything, because he knows what is best. Chapter 10. When Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, heard how Joshua had taken Ai and utterly destroyed it, he had done the same to Ai and its king as he had done to Jericho and its king, and how the inhabitants of Gabon had made peace with Israel and were living among them, his people became greatly alarmed, because Gabon was as large as one of the royal cities, larger than Ai, and all its men were courageous. So Adoni-Zedek king of Jerusalem, sent this message to Hoham, king of Hebron, Piram, king of Yarmut, Yaphiah, king of Lachish, and Davir, king of Eglon. Come up and help me, and we'll attack Gabon, because it has made peace with Joshua and the people of Israel. So the 5 kings of the Emorites, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Yarmut, Lachish, and Eglon, got together, went up with all their armies, pitched camp against Gabon, and made war against it. The people of Gabon sent a message to Joshua at their camp in Gilgal that said, "Don't ignore your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us, because all the kings of the Emorites living in the hills have gotten together to fight us." Joshua went up from Gilgal, he and all the fighting men with him, including all the bravest ones. Adonai said to Joshua, "Don't be afraid of them, for I have handed them over to you. Not one of their men will stand against you." Having spent the entire night marching up from Gilgal, Joshua fell upon them, taking them by surprise. Adonai threw them into confusion before Israel and defeated them in a great slaughter at Gavon, pursuing them along the road that goes up from Beit Horon, and beating them back to Azekah and all the way to Makkedah. As they fled before Israel down the road to Beit Horon, Adonai threw huge hailstones down on them all the way to Azekah, and they died. More died because of the hail than because Israel had killed them with the sword. Then, on the day Adonai handed over the Emorites to the people of Israel, Joshua spoke to Adonai in the sight of Israel. He said, "Sun, stand motionless over Gavon. Moon, you too, over Ayalon Valley." So the sun stood still and the moon stayed put, till Israel took vengeance on their enemies. This is written in the book of Yashar, and in English it says Jasher. The sun stood still in the sky and was in no rush to set for nearly a whole day. There has never been a day like that before or since, when Adonai listened to the voice of a man. It happened because Adonai was fighting on Israel's behalf. Joshua returned with all Israel to the camp at Gilgal, but those 5 kings fled and hid themselves in the cave at Makkedah. And it was reported to Joshua that the 5 kings had been found hiding in the cave at Makkedah. Joshua said, "Roll big stones through the mouth of the cave and put men there to guard them. However, you don't wait, but keep chasing your enemies and attack those farthest in the rear. Don't allow them to return to their cities, because Adonai has handed them over to you." After Joshua and the people of Israel had finished killing them off in a very great slaughter, till they had been destroyed, and the remaining remnant had entered the fortified cities, all the people returned safely to Joshua at the camp at Makkedah, and no one said a word against any of the people of Israel. Then Joshua said, "Open the mouth of the cave and bring those 5 kings out of the cave to me." They did it. They brought the 5 kings out to him, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Yarmut, Lachish, and Eglon. After they had brought the 5 kings to Joshua, he summoned all the men of Israel and said to the commanders of the soldiers who had gone with him, "Come here and put your feet on the necks of these kings." They came and put their feet on their necks. Joshua said to them, "Don't be afraid or confused, but be strong and bold, because this is what Adonai will do to all your enemies that you fight against." With that, Joshua struck them and put them to death, hanging them on 5 trees, where they remained hanging until evening. At sunset, Joshua gave an order, and they lowered them from the trees and threw them into the cave where they had hidden themselves, then laid big stones at the mouth of the cave, and there they remained to this day. Joshua captured Makkedah that day, defeating it and its king by the sword. He completely destroyed them, everyone there. He left no one, and he did it to the king of Makkedah, what he had done to the king of Jericho. Joshua went on from Makkedah, and all Israel with him, to Livnah, and he fought against Livnah. Adonai also handed it and its king over to Israel. He defeated it with the sword, everyone there. He left no one, and he did to its king what he had done to the king of Jericho. Jehoshua went off from Libnah, and all Israel with him, to Lachish, and he pitched camp against it and fought against it. Adonai handed it over to Israel. He captured it the second day. He defeated it with the sword, everyone there, exactly as he had done to Libnah. But then Horam, king of Gezer, came up to help Lachish. So Jehoshua attacked him and his people until he had no one left with him. Jehoshua went on from Lachish, and all Israel with him, to Eglon, and he pitched camp against it and fought against it. They captured it that very day. He defeated it with the sword, completely destroyed everyone there, exactly as he had done to Lachish. Jehoshua went up from Eglon, and all Israel with him, to Hebron, and they fought against it. They captured it, defeating it with the sword, including its king, its villages, and everyone there. He left no one, exactly as he had done to Eglon, but he completely destroyed it and everyone there. Jehoshua turned back, and all Israel with him, to Debir, and fought against it. They captured it, its kings, and all its villages, defeating them with the sword and utterly destroying everyone there. He left no one. He did to Debir and its king as he had done to Hebron, and as he had done to Libnah and its king. So Jehoshua attacked all the land, the hills, the Negev, the Shephelah, and the mountain slopes, and all their kings. He left none, but completely destroyed everything that breathed, as Adonai the God of Israel had ordered. Jehoshua attacked them from Kadesh Barnea to Azaz, and all the land of Goshen, as far as Gabon. Jehoshua captured all these kings and their land, all at the same time, because Adonai the God of Israel fought on Israel's behalf. Then Jehoshua returned, and all Israel with him, to the camp at Gilgal. Chapter 11. When Yavin, king of Hatzor, heard of it, he informed Yovav, king of Madon, the king of Shimron, the king of Akshaph, the kings to the north, in the hills, in the Arava, south of Kinrot, in the Shephelah, and in the regions of Dor on the west, the Canaani to the east and west, the Amorah, Hittah, Perizzi, and Yevusi in the hills, and the Hava at the foot of Hermon in the land of Mizpah. So they set out, they and all their armies, many people, in number like the sand at the seashore, with very many horses and chariots. All these kings met together, and came and pitched camp together at the Merom spring to fight Israel. Now you would think, after hearing about how God was fighting on their behalf, that all of these nations would be willing to make peace with Israel, because obviously they can't win. God's fighting for them. So, but unfortunately, they didn't. So they got destroyed. And we need to try to remember this as well, that it doesn't matter how big our enemy is, that God will fight for us. And even Satan and his demons, they seem so big and powerful and scary, but we don't have anything to fear from them, because God is fighting for us, and he will ultimately destroy them. Verse 6. And I said to Jehoshua, don't be afraid on their account, because at this time tomorrow I will hand them over, all of them dead, before Israel. You are to hamstring their horses and burn up their chariots. So Jehoshua came against them suddenly with all his fighting men, and fell on them at the Merom spring. And I handed them over to Israel. They attacked and chased them to Greater Zidon, Misrephoth Maim, and eastward to the Mizpah valley, and attacked them until none of them was left. Jehoshua did to them what Adonai had ordered. He hamstrung their horses and burned up their chariots. Then Jehoshua turned back and captured Hatzor, striking its king dead with the sword. For in time past, Hatzor had been the head of all those kingdoms. They put everyone there to death with the sword, completely destroying them. There was nothing left that breathed, and he burned Hatzor to the ground. Jehoshua captured all the cities of those kings, and the kings as well. He defeated them with the sword and completely destroyed them, as Moshe the servant of Adonai had ordered. But as for the cities built on their tails, Israel burned none of them. And tails, T-E-L-S, means mounds. Israel burned none of them except Hatzor. Jehoshua did burn that one. All the spoil of these cities and the livestock, the people of Israel took as booty for themselves. But every human being they put to death with the sword, until they had destroyed them. They left no one breathing. Moshe had given orders to Jehoshua, just as Adonai had given orders to Moshe his servant, and Jehoshua acted accordingly. He did everything Adonai had ordered Moshe. So Jehoshua captured all that land, the hills, the Negev, all the land of Goshen, the Shephelah, the Arabah, and the Israel hills in Shephelah, from the bare mountain that goes up to Seir, to Baal Gad in the Lebanon valley, and under Mount Hermon. And he took all their kings, struck them, and put them to death. Jehoshua made war with all those kings for a long time. Not one city made peace with the people of Israel, except for the Havah living in Gavon. They took everything in battle, for it was Adonai who caused them to harden their hearts and come against Israel in battle, so that they would be utterly destroyed, so that they would not find favor but be destroyed, in keeping with the orders Adonai had given Moshe. Jehoshua at that time came and cut off the Anakim from the land, from Hebron, Debir, Anav, and from all the hill country of Judah and Israel. Jehoshua utterly destroyed them and their cities. No Anakim were left in the land of the people of Israel. Only in Azal, Gat, and Ashdod did some remain. Jehoshua took the whole land, in keeping with all that Adonai had said to Moshe and to Israel according to their divisions into tribes. Then the land rested from war. Chapter 12. These are the kings of the land whom the people of Israel defeated, and of whose land they took possession, across the Jordan toward the east, from the Arnon valley to Mount Hermon and all the Arabah eastward. Sihon, king of the Amorite, who lived in Heshbon and ruled the territory. That includes Aroer at the edge of the Arnon valley, the middle of the valley, half of Gilead to the Yabok river, which forms the border with the people of Ammon, the Arabah to Lake Kinneret eastward, and to the sea of the Arabah, the Dead Sea, eastward by the way of Beit Yeshimot, and on the south toward the slopes of Pisgah. There was also the territory of Og, king of Bashan, who belonged to the remnant of the Rephaim. He lived at Ashtaroth and at Edrei, and he ruled Mount Hermon, Selkah, all Bashan, to the border with the Geshuri and the Makhati, and half of Gilead, to its borders with Sihon, king of Heshbon. Moshe, the servant of Adonai, with the people of Israel, defeated them, and Moshe, the servant of Adonai, gave it to the Rephaiim, the Gadi, and the half-tribe of Menasha as their possession. Following are the kings of the land whom Jehoshua, the people of Israel, defeated in the area west of the Jordan, between Baal Gad and the Lebanon valley, and the bare mountain that goes up to Seir. Jehoshua gave this land, inhabited by the Hittite, Amorite, Canaanite, Perizi, Hava, and Yebusi, to the tribes of Israel to possess, according to their divisions, in the hills, the Shephelah, the Arabah, the mountain slopes, the desert, and the Negev. The king of Jericho, the king of Ai by Bethel, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Yarmut, the king of Lachish, the king of Eglon, the king of Gezer, the king of Devir, the king of Geder, the king of Hormah, the king of Arad, the king of Libnah, the king of Adullam, the king of Makkedah, the king of Bethel, the king of Tapuach, the king of Hefer, the king of Aphek, the king of Sharon, the king of Madon, the king of Hatzor, the king of Shimron Moron, the king of Akshaph, king of Tanakh, the king of Megiddo, the king of Kadesh, the king of Yokneam in Carmel, the king of Dor in the region of Dor, the king of Goyim in the Gilgal, and the king of Tirzah, making a total of 31 kings. Chapter 13. Now Jehoshua was old, the years had taken their toll. And I said to him, You are old, and the years have taken their toll. But there is yet a great deal of land to be possessed. This is the land that still remains, all the regions of the Plishtim and all the Geshuri, from the Shahor, which fronts Egypt, to the border of Ekron. Northward from there, the land is considered as belonging to the Canaanite. That is, the territory of the rulers of the Plishtim and Azov, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Kat, and Ekron. Also the Avim, to the south, all the land of the Canaanite, Meara, which belongs to the Zidoni, as far as Aphek, and on to the border with Imrah. The land of the Givli, all the Lebanon eastward, from Baal Gad at the foot of Mount Hermon to the entrance of Hamat. As for the inhabitants of the hills between the Lebanon and Mishrephat Maim, that is, all the Sidonim, I myself will expel them ahead of the people of Israel. All you have to do is assign it to Israel as an inheritance, as I have ordered you. So now divide this land as an inheritance for the 9 tribes and the half-tribe of Menasha. With the half-tribe of Menasha, the Reubeni and the Gadi received their inheritance, which Moshe had given them, beyond their Jordan eastward, just as Moshe the servant of Adonai had given them. From Aroer on the edge of the Arnon Valley, the city in the middle of the valley, all the plateau between Madva and Devon, and all the cities of Sihon, king of the Emorah, who ruled in Heshbon to the border with the people of Ammon. In Gilad, the territory of the Geshuri, and Makkadi, all Mount Hermon, all Bashan as far as Salcah, that is, all the kingdom of Og and Bashan, who ruled in Ashtaroth and Edrei. Og was one of those remaining from the Rephaim, whom Moshe defeated and expelled. However, the people of Israel expelled neither the Geshuri nor the Makkadi, with the consequence that Geshur and Makkat have lived among Israel to this day. Only to the tribe of Levi did Moshe give no inheritance, because the offerings made by fire for Adonai, the God of Israel, are its inheritance, as Adonai had said to Moshe. Moshe gave land to the tribe of the descendants of Reuben by clans. Their territory included Aroer on the edge of the Arnon Valley, the city in the middle of the valley, all the plateau near Madva, Heshbon and its villages on the plateau, Devon, Bamat, Baal, Bet Baalman, Yahatz, Kedemot, Mafat, Kuyatayim, Sivma, Zeret Shahar at the top of the valley, Beit Peor, the slopes of Pisgah, Beit Yeshimot, all the cities of the plateau, all the kingdom of Sihon, king of the Emorah, who ruled in Heshbon. Moshe defeated him with the chiefs of Midian, along with the Evi, Rakim, Zur, Hur, and Reva, the princes of Sihon who lived in the land. Along with the others, the people of Israel killed with the sword. They also struck down Balaam, the son of Beor, who practiced divination. The Jordan formed the border for the descendants of Reuben. This was the inheritance of the descendants of Reuben by clans, with its cities and villages. Moshe gave land to the tribe of Gad, the descendants of Gad by clans. Their territory included Yazer, all the cities of Gilad, half the land of the people of Ammon, as far as Aroer, fronting Rabbah, that is, from Heshbon to remote Mitzpah and Batonim, and from Mahanaim to the border of Lidvir, while in the valley it included Beit Haram, Beit Nimrah, Sukkot, and Zaphon. In other words, the rest of the kingdom of Sihon, king of Heshbon, with the Jordan to the far end of Lake Kinneret at its border. Their territory extended eastward. This is the inheritance of the descendants of Gad by clans, with its cities and villages. Moshe gave an inheritance to the half-tribe of Menasha. It was for the half-tribe of the descendants of Menasha by clans. Their territory included Mahanaim and all of Bashan, that is, all the kingdom of Og, king of Bashan, all the villages of Yair and Bashan, 60 cities, half of Gilad, and Ashtaroth and Edrei, the cities of the kingdom of Og and Bashan. All this was for the descendants of Machir, the son of Menasha, or rather, for half the descendants of Machir by clans. These are the inheritances which Moshe distributed in the plains of Moab, beyond the Jordan and Jericho eastward. But to the tribe of Levi Moshe gave no inheritance. Adonai, the God of Israel, is their inheritance, as he told them. Excuse me. Chapter 14. These are the inheritances which the people of Israel took in the land of Canaan, which Eleazar the Cohen, Yehoshua the son of Nun, and the heads of the ancestral clans of the tribes of the people of Israel distributed to them, by lot for them to inherit, as Adonai ordered through Moshe, for the 9 tribes and the half-tribe. Moshe had already given the inheritances to the 2 tribes and the half-tribe beyond the Jordan. To the Leviim he gave no inheritance among them. The descendants of Joseph constituted 2 tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim. They gave no portion of the land to the Leviim, except cities to live in, with the open land surrounding them for their livestock and crops. As Adonai had ordered Moshe, so the people of Israel did. They divided the land. The descendants of Yehudah approached Yehoshua in Gilgal, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizi, said to him, "You know what Adonai told Moshe, the man of God, about me and you in Kadesh Barnea. I was 40 years old when Moshe, the servant of Adonai, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to reconnoiter the land, and I brought back to him an honest report. My brothers who went up with me discouraged the people, but I followed Adonai, my God, completely. On that day Moshe swore, 'Surely the land where your foot has been will be the inheritance for you and your descendants forever, because you have followed Adonai, my God, completely.' Now, look, Adonai has kept me alive these 45 years, as he said he would, from the time Adonai said this to Moshe when Israel was going through the desert. Today I am 85 years old, but I am as strong today as on the day Moshe sent me. I am as strong now as I was then, whether for war or simply for going here and there. Therefore, give me this hill, the one Adonai spoke about on that day, for on that day you heard how the Anakim were there with great fortified cities. Perhaps Adonai will be with me, and I will drive them away as Adonai said." Yehoshua blessed him and gave Hebron to Caleb the son of Jephunneh as his inheritance. So Hebron became the inheritance of Caleb the son of Jephunneh the Kenizi, as it is to this day, because he followed Adonai the God of Israel completely. Wouldn't it be great to be that old and be still just as strong as you were in your younger days? Wow, that's awesome. Good, but it can happen. Hebron was formerly called Kiryat Arba. This Arba was the greatest man among the Anakim. Then the land had rest from war. I'm going to look that up for just one moment. Hold on. Okay. Okay, so the only thing I'm finding so far is on Wikipedia, and it says that according to the biblical commentator Rashi, Kiryat Arba, town of Arba, means either the town Kiryat means town of Arba, the giant who had 3 sons, or the town of the 4 giants. Anak, the son of Arba, and his 3 sons, Ahaman, Shishai, and Talmai, who are described as being the sons of a giant in Numbers 13:22. And it says that Kiryat Arba is also mentioned as the former name of Hebron, and as the place where Abraham's wife Sarah had died. So, but I'm going to do some more research on that, see if I can find out something more. I may or may not, but if it says he's the greatest man among the Anakim, I'm wondering, does that mean that he was the tallest, or if that meant that he was the richest, or the nicest, or what exactly that means? But whenever I find out, I'll definitely let you know. Okay, so let's go back to verse 15, because I've lost my place. Hebron was formerly called Kiryat Arba. This Arba was the greatest man among the Anakim. Then the land had rest from war. Chapter 15. The territory chosen by Lot for the tribe of the descendants of Yehudah, according to their families, extended to the border of Edom in the Zin Desert, toward the Negev in the far south. Their southern border began at the far shore of the Dead Sea, from the bay facing southward, and went out south of the Scorpion Ascent, passed toward Zin, went up south of Kadesh Barnea, passed Hetzron, went up toward Adar, then turned toward Karka, passed toward Atzmon, and went out at the Valley of Egypt, while the border ended at the sea. This will be your southern border. The eastern border was the Dead Sea to where the Jordan entered it. And you could actually find maps on the internet if you didn't. You probably already know, but if you don't, you can always type in the search bar, and then where you're running. I've been Israel or ancient Israel, and you could see all these. Click enter, then down below it'll say videos and maps and images, and you can just click on images, and you can find maps like that as well. The northern border began at the Bay of the Sea at the end of the Jordan. Then the border went up to Beit Hogla and passed north of Beit Arabah. Next the border went up to the stone of Bahan, the son of Reuben. Then the border went up to the Beer from the Echor Valley, then northward facing Gilgal, that is, across from Ma'ale Adumim, which is on the south side of the body. Next, the border passed to the An Shemesh spring and went out at Ein Rogel. Then the border went up the Ben Hinnom Valley to the south side of the Yevusi, that is, Jerusalem, and the border continued up to the top of the hill in front of the Hinnom Valley on the west, which is also at the northernmost end of the Rephaim Valley. From this hilltop the border was drawn to the source of the Neftawak spring and continued out to the cities of Mount Ephron. Next the border was drawn to Baalah, that is, Kiryat Yearim. Then the border turned from Baal westward to Mount Seir, past the spur of Mount Yearim, also called Kisalam, on the north, and went down to Bet Shemesh and past Timnah. Next, the border went out toward the side of Ekron northward, and finally the border was drawn to Shikron, past Mount Baalah, and went out Yavneel, with the border ending at the sea. And I just remembered something else. You could also go on Google Maps, and you could actually see in color. If you click on the satellite, so when you click on Google Maps, it'll just show like a black and white picture. But there'll be like a little screen down below, a little square down below that says satellite. You click on that, and then you could actually zoom in. You could see actual buildings and stuff in color. Verse 12. As for the west border, the great sea was its border. These were the borders of the territory of the descendants of Yehudah by clans. To Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, he gave a portion with the descendants of Yehudah, as Adonai had ordered Jehoshua, namely, Kiryat Arba. Arba was the father of the Anak, also called Hebron. Caleb expelled from there 3 descendants of Anak, Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai, children of Anak. From there he went up to fight the inhabitants of Debir. Debir was formerly called Kiryat Sefer. Caleb said, "To whoever overpowers Kiryat Sefer and captures it, I will give my daughter Achsah as his wife." Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's brother, captured it. So he gave him Achsah, his daughter, as his wife. After becoming his wife, she persuaded him to ask her father to give them a field. When she got off her donkey, Caleb asked her, "What do you want?" She said to him, "Give me a blessing, since you gave me land in the Negev. Also give me sources of water." So Caleb gave her the upper springs and the lower springs. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the descendants of Yehudah by clans. The cities at the outer part of the tribe of Yehudah toward the border with Edom in the south were Kabzeel, Eder, Yagur, Kana, Damona, Adada, Kadesh, Hatzor, Yitnan, Ziph, Telem, Baalat, Hatzor, Hadatah, Kiriot, Hetzron, which is Hatzor, Amam, Shema, Moladah, Hatzor, Kadah, Heshbon, Beit Pelet, Hazar Shual, Beersheba, Bizrot Yah, Baalah, Ayim, Etzim, El Tolad, Kasil, Hormah, Ziklag, Madmanah, Sensanah, Lavayot, Shohim, Ain, and Ramon, 29 cities in all, together with their villages. In the Shephelah, Eshtaol, Zorah, Ashna, Zanoach, Ain Kanim, Tapuach, Enem, Yarmut, Adulam, Sokah, Azekah, Sharim, Adatayim, Gederatayim, 14 cities together with their villages. Zidon, Hadasha, Migdal Gad, Dalan, Mitzpah, Yoktiel, Lachish, Bozkat, Eglon, Kaban, Lamas, Kitlish, Gederot, Beit Dagon, Naamah, and Makkedah, 16 cities together with their villages. Libnah, Eter, Ashan, Yiftah, Ashna, Netziv, Keilah, Achziv, and Marshah, 9 cities together with their villages. Ekron with its towns and villages. From Ekron to the sea, all those near Ashdod with their villages. Ashdod with its towns and villages. Azal with its towns and villages. To the Valley of Egypt, with the great sea as its border. In the hills, Shamir, Yatir, Sako, Danah, Kiryat Sanah, that is Debir, Anav, Eshtemoa, Anim, Goshen, Holon, and Gilo, 11 cities, together with their villages. Arad, Dumah, Ashan, Enum, Beit Tapuach, Avakah, Humtah, Kiryat Arba, that is, Hebron, and Zayor, 9 cities together with their villages. Maon, Carmel, Ziph, Utah, Israel, Yokdeam, Zanoach, Cain, Givah, Timnah, 10 cities together with their villages. Halhu, Beit Zur, Gedor, Marat, Beit Anat, Elkan, 6 cities together with their villages. Kiryat Baal, that is Kiryat Yearim, and Rabbah, 2 cities together with their villages. In the desert, Beit Arava, Madian, Sekaka, Nifsham, Hamalak, and Engedi, 6 cities together with their villages. As for the Yevusi, who lived in Yerushalayim, the descendants of Yehudah could not drive them out. So the Yevusi live with the descendants of Yehudah in Yerushalayim to this day. Now I know this seems very long and boring, but the reason why we're giving this information is so that it'll be as a record, so that anyone who tries to say, well, this doesn't belong to the nation of Israel, there's proof that God did give it to them. So it can't be taken away from them. Chapter 16. The border of the territory chosen by Lot for the descendants of Joseph began from the Jordan at Jericho, at the spring of Jericho on the east, went up from Jericho through the hills and the desert to Bethel, went out from Bethel to Luz, passed on to the border with the Arkat to Adarat, went down westward to the border with the Yaphleti, to the border of Lower Beit Horon, on to Gezer and ending at the sea. So the descendants of Joseph, Menasha, and Ephraim took the inheritance. The border of the descendants of Ephraim, according to their families, was as follows. The eastern border of their inheritance began at Atrat Adar and went to Upper Beit Horon. Then the border extended westward with Mikmatot on the north. Next the border turned eastward to Teanot, Shiloh, and passed by it to the east of Yonakah. Then it went down from Yonakah to Adarat, went to Naarah, extended to Jericho, and ended at the Jordan. From Tapuach, the border went westward to Vadi Kanah and ended at the sea. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the descendants of Ephraim according to their families, together with the cities set aside for the descendants of Ephraim inside the territory to be inherited by the descendants of Menasha, all the cities with their villages. They did not drive out the Canaani living in Gezer, so the Canaani live together with Ephraim to this day, having become slaves to do the heavy work. Chapter 17. This was the territory chosen by Lot for the tribe of Menasha, for he was the firstborn of Joseph. As for Machir, the firstborn of Menasha, the father of Gilad, because he was a warrior, he caught Gilad and Bashan. So the lot was drawn for the other descendants of Menasha, according to their families. For the descendants of Ezer, Helek, Asriel, Shechem, Hefer, and Shemitah, these were the male descendants of Menasha, according to their families. But Zelophehad, the son of Hefer, the son of Gilad, the son of Machir, the son of Menasha, had no sons, only daughters. These are the names of his daughters: Machlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. They approached Eleazar the Cohen, Yehoshua the son of Nun, and the leaders, and said, Adonai ordered Moshe to give us an inheritance together with our kinsmen. Therefore, in keeping with Adonai's order, he gave them an inheritance together with the kinsmen of their father. Thus 10 parts fell to Menashe, in addition to the land of Gilad and Bashan beyond the Jordan, because the daughters of Menashe had an inheritance along with his descendants. But the land of Gilad belonged to the rest of the descendants of Menashe. The border of Menashe began at Asher and went on to Mikmatot, which is across from Shechem. Next, the border went along to the right to the people of Zin Tappuach. The land of Tappuach belonged to Menasha, but Tappuach on the border of Menasha belonged to the descendants of Ephraim. The border descended to Wadi Canaan, south of the Vada, by cities which belonged to Ephraim, among the cities of Menasha. But the border with Menasha was on the north side of the Wadi, and it ended at the sea. Southward it was Ephraim's, northward it was Menashe's, and the sea was its border, while to the north they extended to Asher, and on the east to Issachar. In Asher and at Issachar, Menasha had Beit Shan and its villages, Yivli and its villages, and the inhabitants of Dor and its villages, of Eindor and its villages, of Taanach and its villages, and of Megiddo and its villages, 3 districts in all. But the descendants of Menasha could not drive out the inhabitants of those cities. The Canaani wanted to stay in that land. After the people of Israel had become strong, they made the Canaani do heavy labor, but didn't completely drive them out. Then the descendants of Joseph spoke to Yehoshua. They said, "Why have you given me only one lot and only one portion to inherit? After all, I am a great people, since Adonai has blessed me so." Yehoshua answered them, "If you are a great people, go up to the forest and clear land for yourself there in the territory of the Perezi and the Rephaim, since the hills of Ephraim don't give you enough space." The descendants of Joseph replied, "The hills won't be enough for us, and all the Canaani living in the valleys have iron chariots. Both those in Beit Shan and its villages, and those in the Yisrael valley." Then Yehoshua said to the house of Joseph, to both Ephraim and Menashe, "You are a great people with much power. You will not have only one lot, but the hills too will be yours. Although as a forest, you will clear it, and the resulting open land will be yours. You will drive out the Canaani, even though they have iron chariots and are strong." Chapter 18. The entire community of the people of Israel assembled themselves together at Shiloh and set up the tent of meeting there, after the land had been subdued before them. There still remained among the people of Israel 7 tribes that had not yet received their inheritance. Yehoshua said to the people of Israel, "How long will you delay going in to take possession of the land which Adonai, the God of your ancestors, has given you? Appoint 3 men for each tribe. I will commission them, and they are to set out, go through the land, and describe it according to their inheritance. Then they are to come back to me. They are to divide it into 7 portions, with Yehudah remaining in its territory to the south, and the house of Joseph in their territory to the north. You will describe 7 portions of land and bring the descriptions here to me. Then I will cast lots for you here before Adonai your God. But the Leviim have no share with you, because the office of Cohen to Adonai is their inheritance. And Gad and Reuben and the half-tribe of Menashe have received their inheritance beyond the Jordan to the east, which Moshe, the servant of Adonai, gave them." So the men got up and went. Yehoshua gave them this commission as they left to describe the land. "Go, walk through the land and describe it. Then come back to me, and I will cast lots for you here before Adonai in Shiloh." The men went and passed through the land, surveying it by cities, dividing it into 7 regions, and writing the results on a scroll. Then they came to Yehoshua in the camp of Shiloh. Yehoshua cast lots for them in Shiloh before Adonai, and there Yehoshua divided the land among the people of Israel according to their regions. The lot for the tribe of the descendants of Benjamin came up according to their families. The border of their territory chosen by lot was between the descendants of Yehudah and the descendants of Joseph. On the north side, their border began at the Jordan, went up alongside Jericho on the north, continued up through the hills westward, and arrived at the Beit of Desert. From there, the border passed on to Luz, to the south side of Luz, that is, Bet El. Then the border went down to Atrot Adar, by the hill on the south side of Lower Beit Horon. The border was delineated. I'm having trouble saying it's Delineated. Delineated. The border was delineated as turning at the western corner and heading southward from the hill located in front of Bet Horon on the south, and it ended at Kiryat Baal, that is, Kiryat Yearim, a city belonging to the descendants of Yehuda. This was the west side. On the south, the border extended westward from the most distant part of Kiryat Yearim, going out to the source of the Neftawak spring. Then the border went down to the farthest part of the hill, located in front of the Ben Hinnom Valley, north of the Rephaim Valley, south of the Yevusi, and continued down to Ein Rogel, where it was drawn to the north. Then it went on to Ein Shemesh, continued to Gilalat, which is across from Me'aleh Adumim, went down to the stone of Mahan, the son of Reuben, passed alongside the Arabah, heading north, and went down to Arabah. Then the border passed alongside Bet Hoglah, heading north, and the border ended at the north bay of the Dead Sea, at the south end of the Jordan. This was the south border. The Jordan was to be its border on the east side. This was the inheritance of the descendants of Benjamin, defined by its surrounding borders according to their families. The cities of the tribe of the descendants of Benjamin, according to their families, were Jericho, Bet Hoglah, Emek Kitzitz, Bet Aravah, Zamaraim, Bet El, Avim, Parah, Afra, Kafar Hayamona, Afna, and Geba, 12 cities, together with their villages. Gavon, Ramah, Beerot, Mitzpah, Kefira, Matzah, Rekem, Yerpiel, Tarla, Zillah, Eleph, Yevusi, that is, Jerusalem, Kavat, and Kiryat, 14 cities together with their villages. This is the inheritance of the descendants of Benjamin according to their families. So that is the end of our reading today. We'll start our next reading at chapter 19. And just hit the like, subscribe, and buttons, and you'll be also the notification bell, and then that way you'll be notified of future videos. And I hope you have a wonderful and blessed rest of your day. Bye bye.